welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. In this podcast, I spoke to Lou McLoughlan, a director and cinematographer. I specifically wanted to talk about her film which came out last year called 16 Years Till Summer. It's an astonishing documentary which I reviewed on Scots Whay Hae, and that review's still there. Everyone I know who has subsequently seen it is just amazed by the story that unfolds. It really does show, I think, that true life is far more complex and intriguing than fiction could ever be. Lou, I also wanted to talk to Lou about just documentary making in Scotland in general, and she talks about how difficult it is to kind of get noticed in Scotland. A lot of documentaries go to festivals around the world, get picked up and praised and win awards, but yet it's difficult for them to get recognition here. This is a timely podcast, I think, with the Glasgow Film Festival just about to start, or perhaps even started by the time you hear this. And there are some fantastic documentaries on show there as well, which you should really check out. And there is a preview of the Glasgow Film Festival over at Scots Whay Hae right now. But before you read that, have a listen to Lou McLoughlan. It's a very interesting discussion for anyone interested in film. And I'll see you again after this. Cheers. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm talking to Lou McLoughlan, director and cinematographer. Mm-hmm. Hello Lou.
Hello.
And we're talking to you, well, partly because of your film 16 Years Till Summer, which came out earlier this year, but also we're going to talk about documentary making and how important it is in general.
Sure.
But first of all, tell us a little bit about 16 Years Till Summer.
Well, 16 Years Till Summer, I guess, is my first feature film after making a short called Caring for Callum. It took about 5 years to make. It was a co-production with Iceland and the German TV company and some others. And basically, it wasn't a film I ever planned. It was I was just earning my way through a postgraduate at ECA, where there's a fantastic course that's producing a lot of really interesting non-fiction filmmakers, taught by Emma Davey, who's pretty renowned in her own right as a tutor and a filmmaker. Anyway, so I was working across the prisons, and I was in Castle Huntley, and a man came up to me who'd been part of the group that we were filming. And he said, I'm going home on home leave. My family's lived on the same patch of land for the last 200 years. Would you like to come with me and film me with my father? Because I don't know how long he's got left, and I'd love some memories of him in case I'm not released in the foreseeable future. So I said, yes, of course, I can do that.
So what unfolds without kind of giving anything away is pretty extraordinary.
It is.
Because it begins, as you say, with him and making a reconnection, is that fair, with his elderly father? And it's this wonderful, I think, warm father-son relationship where the father is still kind of treating him like a young man and telling him how to do the garden.
He is, isn't he? He is the patriarch, and always will be.
Exactly. Yes. But then this darker story unfolds. I mean, was that a surprise to you?
Yes, it was, because I thought it was a story about hope. I thought it was a story about a father's unconditional love for his son, and I thought it was all going to end beautifully with something very good coming out of something bad. And I thought Ustin would end up setting up his croft and living a very idyllic and idealised Highland life, and I'd have a film with a really happy ending.
And that's not what happens.
That's not what happens, but it nearly kind of happened.
Yeah.
And I thought that's the way it was going to go.
Yeah.
And then something happens to stop that. and I shouldn't give the film away.
No.
And then after that, he meets this extraordinary woman with this superhuman love for him.
Absolutely.
And again, I thought, oh great, something is going to be redeemed from this. It's going to be really positive. Maybe I'm just a bit of a schmuck, I don't know. But and again, I can't give away the end, but something happens at the end that just completely shocked me again. It made me feel that maybe I was a bit naive or optimistic, or I don't know.
But I think it shows that often, real life is more complex than fiction could ever be. Because I think if someone had written these two storylines that, as you say, kind of don't go the way that perhaps you would expect them, don't follow a normal narrative,
yes,
that people would say, well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, I know some people that have watched it kind of with incredulity that what unfolds in the way it does.
I think when you're watching somebody's life unfold through the eyes of two people that love them, you can't help but see them and film them through those eyes. So I'm filming him with the same amount of faith. He's being seen with by his dad and his partner. And it's just occasionally you get the chance to pull away from that and say, well, actually, okay, things don't completely add up here. The things that are being spoken about, for instance, in the past with the original crime, they don't altogether add up. His account of things and what the state's made of what he'd done, didn't make sense when you looked into it a bit more. But then you could also understand the shame that somebody carries when they go home to a small place and they're trying to not impress their father, but be worthy of him.
Yeah.
And you can understand why that would produce a very partial recall of something.
Absolutely, of course.
And I guess the thing is, we don't hang people. We do give them a second chance. So it's just willing somebody to actually make the best of that.
I mean, that's what I took from the film was it was about faith in people, and as you say, unconditional love, and how far, I suppose, that can be stretched. I mean, that sounds odd because it's unconditional, but
it's never completely
it's never
unconditional.
complete.
It can't be, can it?
Exactly.
That would be idiocy.
Exactly. Well, it's a fantastic film, I have to say. I've watched it a couple of times now, and you get something new from it. I think the second time round, definitely, because you suddenly, all the twists, for want of a better term, that come along, they don't shock you in the same way, therefore the other stuff kind of that comes along. I was interested in the way it looks as well. I mean, it's got a real connection with nature and the landscape. I should say it's filmed up near, what's the village it's filmed in?
It's Lochcarron.
Well done. Sorry, I shouldn't be testing you in this way. So it's up it's kind of
Portnacree. It's part of Lochcarron.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. I mean,
it's a beautiful place. Yes, it's a very empty place. I mean, if you it's huge, intimidating, or very, very beautiful landscapes, depending on what the weather looks like.
It's a part of Scotland that still is overlooked a lot. We tend to concentrate. Even documentaries on Central Belt and urban stories, and to see this kind of where his father's cottages or his houses is just this stunning view from it. I mean, it's amazing. So did the subject affect the way you shot the film, or did you have a style that you think, this is, I'm going to apply my style to what I'm filming?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. I know some filmmakers do that. They have a style or a language that they want to impose on a story. But I think what I'm really interested in is finding the language from the story that's right to tell the story with. And some parts of that are really obvious, and some parts of that are probably more felt. So I suppose when you're trying to paint a character portrait and you're using film, you can do things like use the rhythm of the edit, or you can use, well, for instance, with Ustin, his character is has a real stop-start energy to it. He's sort of very lyrical and flowing, and then tends to sort of interrupt his own progress by doing something erratic. So that's in the edit, and I don't expect anybody to notice this, but I do expect them to feel it when they're watching it. So, for instance, there's a scene where obviously he's been in prison too long to have a child or a family, particularly. So he puts a newborn lamb, on his father's lap instead of a grandchild. Perhaps you could see in that way. And at the end of that scene, convention would say it's a happy scene, it's a lovely coming together scene. Give the audience a breather. Let them have a wide shot of this beautiful croft, by moonlight. Wouldn't that be lovely? Just let them relax around that scene. But because of him being who he is and not wanting to build up the wrong expectations in the audience, I could then interrupt that and not give the resolving shot with him in the armchair saying, there's not a lot of a social life here.
Yeah.
So you never let the audience breathe out, because I find that he doesn't.
Yes.
So it's just a case of being honest about what you're filming, so the language comes out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. As a character, as a person, he has this energy, constantly making up new plans, constantly have ideas. He always has plans for the future.
Which makes sense, doesn't it, as well?
Of course it does,
because if you've been in prison for 16 years, of course you're going to be full of plans. So that's not an obvious marker at first of him being, unusually ambitious or eager to burn himself out in that way, until you're around him for a bit longer, and then you realise there is a special energy around them.
You said earlier that it took 6 months to edit.
Yes, it did.
So how much footage did you actually have, considering how long you were?
I didn't dare count it. I don't know.
Too much.
It was what? 4 years, 5 years, 4 years of footage, yes. And I wasn't filming all the time.
Yeah.
But I was scarce with it. I was thrifty, but there was quite a lot. Yeah, it's like it's what is that thing? I think when you're making documentary, it's like finding that whispering voice under the rubble of an earthquake. That's where the story is, and you just have to listen very hard and dig hard until you find, okay, this is the consistent thread that's running through this film.
I'm interested in how the story comes out in the edit, because obviously you could take it in different ways, from what you have filmed. How do you decide that this is the story that you want to tell?
Well, I think there are two approaches. There's two strands to this. You've got an outer story and an inner story. If you want formulas, and sometimes formulas do work to just get you on a steady footing with a film.
Sure.
And I think so. So I suppose the outer story for me, the thing that would actually hold the film together, would be his ambitions for that house. So you've got a very strong scene about what those ambitions are.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether I included it, but I remember him standing in front of Loch Arran, in front of the loch itself, and actually saying, and I'm going to turn this garden, this fruit, this veg garden of his dad's, into a water feature. He's going to put water. You're like, what? You've got this gorgeous loch behind you. What are you doing? It's just ambition gone mad. Anyway, so there's that, and that carries through, because at the second half of the film, these ambitions for the house, come to nothing. He thought he was going to be the heir, and that's all thrown up into the air. So that was the consistent external story. But what's going on inside, for me, I suppose, the emotional truth of the film is what gets sacrificed when people are determined to see the best in each other, because they love each other.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to come across that moment where you've got to start questioning that. It's painful.
To face up to perhaps a reality that you don't want to face up to. And I think that comes to himself as well. I think he has to. Does he face up to it? I'm not sure. I think the thing I took about him, wanting to build a water feature or wanting to extend or all this, it seemed to me that was what a lot of people are sold as normality, or what aspirational, or what you should have. It's in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife and all of those things.
You just created a talking head song.
Yes, I know. That's why I do tend to do that all the time. But he sees that as being, if he has one chance at happiness or normality, or more than one chance, that's what's going to give him that, instead of actually the people that are showing him this support.
I suppose also, yes, you've got a point, but also I think it's one of those basic human needs, isn't it, to have a foothold and a home and a roof over your head as well. And I suppose you don't know what he had planned inside that house, but yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, because I don't want to give anything away. So let's move away onto the idea of documentary making in general. I mean, you mentioned there that you made this film.
Actually, Alistair, could I mention something else there?
Of course you can.
Because you talk about ambition for a spot, an area, or a landscape, and I think, I've been doing this really interesting kind of extended screening which we did at the Storytelling Centre.
Yes.
With Hugh Cheap and Marion McFadden, who are both creative ethnologists, and they know so much about Scottish storytelling and brought so much to the interpretations of Scottish documentary making, recent Scottish documentary making. And we were talking about how the Highland landscape is seen as a really kind of seductive space. And it's partly because it's an empty space, it's an empty canvas that you can dream things onto. And it's seen very often, especially since the narrative of the clearances was made very, very strong with the Cheviot, the Stag, and the Black Oil.
Yeah.
It's seen as a place of loss and imagination, and a romanticised kind of loss, but something that needs rebuilding, either crying over or rebuilding. So I think the film in that way falls into it, and that he looks at this space and says, what can I do with it? What can I build on its emptiness? And I think another part of that, as well, of that Highland tradition, is the kind of kitschy Landseer type ornaments you see on the shelves, and they're a very idealised view of the Highlands again, and it's an ideal that nobody can live up to at all. And but he does, as a character, find a lot of protection in donning the tweeds, the plus fours.
Absolutely.
He looks respectable when he puts them on, as opposed to looking like an old lag, or whatever.
It's a costume, he's going to be the laird of the manor. I think that's really interesting. I think because that's an area that is romanticised, and actually the reality of it is, like many other parts of the country, jobs have been lost, there's high unemployment, there's drug problems in a lot of these areas, and people still don't see that or don't know about it, and still have this mythology of the Highlands and Islands as sold through film previously or in song. And it has changed recently. There's been a lot of novels, Kevin McNeil's The Stornoway Way, various others which have redressed that a little bit, but you're right.
And Hugh Cheap is really exciting as well, because he talks about the Gaels of the 1600s and how internationalist and outreaching they were to the rest of Europe just before the Scottish kings. And we were just having a bit of a flight of fancy about that, and talking about how the documentary movement in Scotland was very like that as well. It's partly because of the lack of broadcast opportunities in Scotland and in the UK. We don't have distributors here, and BBC Scotland at the moment doesn't have a lot of slots or budget for things commissioned, from Scottish talent. So we tend to do a lot of co-productions internationally.
So you said that you had co-produced with people from Iceland. And
Germany.
So can you say a bit more about the kind of lack of opportunities in Scotland? Is it just purely money or places to get them shown, to get your film shown?
I think there is that. I think we don't. We used to have distributors here, but we don't anymore. And I remember reading an article written by Sarah Main, and she was talking about how when she sent her manuscript for her novel to a publisher in London, or a couple of publishers, they were a bit sniffy about it, and you kind of get that, because they want to see their world reflected in what they read and what they sell. It's like everybody does that. And she's containing cultural references within her work, that people in this place will get, but people in that place, in that metropolitan area, probably won't get. The same as in my film, it's got references that you won't probably get north of the border. You might if you know Scotland a bit, but you probably won't. So some of it will be lost on you. And she was saying that it wasn't until she sent it to a Scottish publisher that it was appreciated for the work that it was, and then went on to be a bestseller in Canada, where of course they have, a great knowledge of Scottish culture as well. So she was able to have an international reach by being able to contact somebody who'll handle her work here. So going backwards from that, we don't have the equivalent of publishers here at the moment. We don't have distributors. And I think until we get somebody in place, whether it's a nationalised body or attract somebody up here by making, for instance, the very successful non-fiction feature scene we have, a lot more visible than it is. I'm not sure how much space we're going to win for ourselves within the independent cinemas or the chains.
The Scottish independent documentaries travel? Do they do well in festivals, things like that? Are they
fantastically well, yeah. I mean, for instance, I'm thinking now about my tutor's film, Emma Davey. Her film, which is I Am Breathing. I was thinking about the trick is to keep breathing, so I've just read Janice Galloway again. But yes, I Am Breathing. That went to 80 festivals internationally, which is just incredible. And it was broadcast as well in the UK, which was great for her. My film has so far been to 30 festivals, which is fantastic. It's been broadcast in 3 different countries on national TV.
Wow.
So, and that's great. It's brilliant. It's fantastic to be exporting, to have your talent exported with a lot of other Scottish filmmakers and be making a really good name for ourselves abroad. But you also really need a sustainable industry here. And just on a personal level, it's really nice when people see your stuff, where it's been made.
Yep.
That's just pleasant. So that's where we are at the moment. We need more broadcast slots, really. Ideally, we want a broadcaster, whichever one they are, to recognise we're good at feature non-fiction and to get a slot and a budget for it.
So, in terms of just the nuts and bolts of getting films made, how difficult is that to do?
I think it's really intimidating when you don't know how to do it.
Right.
But once you know which is the right pitching session, for instance, to go to flog your film at, when you've just got a taster, you've got a 3-minute taster of it, and you can talk about where you think it's going to go, and show that you're a stubborn enough git to actually see it through to the end, which apparently is a big thing with people broadcasting documentaries. They do have to think that the director is bloody minded enough or determined enough to actually stick with it. Anyway, I think once you've got your pitch right, you've got your festival right, then you're in contact with the people who can fund it. So, for instance, Vision de Reel, was the festival that I pitched my film to, which is where I picked up a pre-sale with BR, which is a really nice German broadcaster. This is before it was made. And I went there because they do creative documentary, they specialise in creative documentary, and they're very well aware of how narrow the format is. This is their words, not mine.
Right, okay.
But how narrow the format is of British TV.
Okay.
So when they saw the teaser, as we call it, they realised that I was probably more likely to get European support than more London-based support for what I was making. And they were absolutely right. They were very keen on it when I got there.
So it isn't even that in Scotland it's difficult to get people to take notice of you making documentaries. It's a UK thing. Well,
yes, it's very London-centred, to be honest. I mean, most of the commissioning goes on in London. And if you take a feature doc to BBC Scotland, as far as I know, and bear in mind they are changing and they've got the new BBC studios and they'll probably come up with a great system very, very soon. We're all hoping that they will, and we'll give them whatever support they need to do that. They at the moment have to go to London to ask for a budget for a film like, for instance, Where You're Meant to Be. They've just bought Paul Fagan's Where You're Meant to Be. I hope it's okay to say that. Yeah. And they have to go to London for that budget, etc. Or they ask you to cut it down to an hour, which costs lots and lots and lots of money and is just in no way really economically viable to do, and also doesn't often suit your film. It wouldn't suit my film.
Absolutely.
I couldn't take 20 minutes out of it. It'd be ridiculous.
Not at all. So, why is it different in Europe? It's just got a better
can I say something else?
Of course you can, yeah.
I missed out because it was right at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is quite interesting. When I'd made the short film and it had got the awards, it had got 2 new talent BAFTAs.
This is Caring for Callum.
Yes. So I had this great sort of set of medals behind me, if you like.
Right,
I had the new talent BAFTAs, the Royal Television Society Award, and the Grierson. So it's like, well, come on, that's got to help get the feature funded. So I went to Reykjavik Film Festival and the talent lab there. And before I got there, I got in touch with a producer in Iceland, because I thought, now, they've just had a banking crash.
Yeah.
They were really feisty with the bankers. They beat their pots and pans outside the parliament and refused to pay up. In fact, they took a lot of them to prison. So I thought, well, these are quite fiery people, and maybe they'll take more of a risk than producers sometimes are known to be a little bit averse to. With a new filmmaker, even with all the medals on your chest that I had with this one. So I went to Reykjavik and met somebody from Six Act Productions there, and he was a lovely guy, and he said yes, he was interested. And then I met their producer, Lynn Johannesdottir, and she really liked the short, and she said she wanted to take a punt on it. Right. So that was great. So actually, the first money I got for this Scottish production was from the Icelandic Film Centre, from an Icelandic production company. And once you've got one producer on board, if we're talking about giving tips to up-and-coming filmmakers, once you've got one backer on board, it always helps to get others.
Right, okay.
So I
once
came
you've got
home
your first one,
with a vote of confidence in the film, and sort of took it from there. And then worked with the Scottish Documentary Institute, who are really good at helping me to develop it. And then,
do you think there was something about your work that appealed to the Icelandic, or would just...
I don't know. Because the TV company wanted it as well. So yes, maybe there was, but maybe it's the sort of the occasional barren lookingness of the landscape, because some of their country it looks otherworldly. It looks like a moonscape.
I've been there and it's incredible. No, the reason I ask it is I've spoken to musicians from kind of Aberdeenshire and further north, and not all of them agree with this, but I say some of the music sounds very similar to stuff that's being made in Sweden or in Scandinavia or Iceland. There's that kind of ethereal sound, for want of a better term, and I wondered if there was something about the landscape that was similar and fed into it, and I wonder if that's similar with the music.
Maybe that's why we had a mixture of Icelandic musicianship in the film, and he very much represents the fantasy element of the film and of the main character, or the dreams of the main character. And then we had, seeing as you mentioned it, the Norwegians, the Scandis, we had Marit Felt, who did I'm going to have to remember what it is. It's a Norwegian mandolin thing.
Right,
I can't remember the name of it. And we had Rona Wilkie, they play together, so you've got it's a Scottish-Norwegian duet. And they're fantastic film composers. And I can't recommend them highly enough. If there's anybody out there looking for film composers, they interpret scenes really, really well. And they earthed the film in the Highlands. They gave it that sound that no other part of the world.
Because you'd say the music is beautiful in it. It really
isn't it? And they knocked it up so quickly as well. They came up with the ideas, then we compressed them to the scenes. Sometimes I recut the scenes to suit the melodies they come up with. And we recorded about 2 weeks afterwards. They would. If there's anybody I would love to get work out of this film afterwards, it's those two, because they really, really deserve it. Rona Wilkie was also Folk Musician of the Year, I think, not so many years ago.
So how did you... is it just over the years you hear about these people and you think, that's who I want to work with, or is there a bit of luck involved in it?
I think they were performing at the Storytelling Centre one evening that I was filming there. I think it was during the referendum. And I just thought, God, these two are having so much fun on the stage, and they're obviously very, very able as well. So I just took the phone numbers afterwards, or maybe Mary McFadden, who gave me the phone numbers, and just called them up when I felt I needed them. When I felt that the Icelandic fantasy, sort of elfin music, wasn't reaching the parts of the film that I needed it to.
And you also said before we started that I was showing surprise that it took 6 months to edit, but you said 6 months is about right for anything.
That's absolutely right, yeah. And it's really interesting because at the moment I'm doing a short commission for the Scottish Film Talent Network, which is a fiction film, so I've crossed over. And it's really odd. I thought it would be much easier because I wouldn't have to spend months and months editing, but actually you just have to spend months writing a script and revising it until it's right, so the edit's kind of foolproof by the time you get there.
So the edit's done in the writing?
Yes, really.
Oh, that is interesting. What got you into making film? What were your influences? Why did you decide to do it?
I think I was just conflicted and confused, and I was good at English and good at painting. And so I just brought them together, and it just seemed the easiest, unfussiest way to pursue a livelihood.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there, but just want to say thanks, Lou, for talking to us.
Thank you for writing such a beautiful review. Do you realise that you're the only person that noticed the first part of the film was based in water, had a water element behind it?
I didn't realise that.
You're the only person that's noticed it. It was such a layered interview. It was a real joy to read. You just thought, okay, all my effort hasn't been wasted here.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, as you can tell from the review, I absolutely loved it.
Did you pick out what the second half of the film's element was?
No, but I'm going to have to go back now. As I say, thank you very much, and we'll be back very soon with someone completely different. Cheers.
The answer was fire, by the way, if you're interested. Well, that was our chat with Lou McLoughlan. I hope you found it as interesting to listen to as I did on the day. I hope the background noise wasn't too much. We recorded it in Glasgow's Project Cafe, and certainly to begin with there's quite a lot of banging and clattering going on, but I think you can probably pick us up clear enough, and that you'll have found something to interest you. As I say, Glasgow Film Festival is underway, and we're going to have a few non-audio interviews with various directors of some of the films on show, and they'll be over at Scots Whay Hae as well. Until then, and until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.